Right thought should always lead to recognition. Right thought is that development of mental capability, is that accumulation of the necessary habit patterns in order to bring about the state of recognition. And that, of course, is recognition of our primordial wisdom nature, of our Buddha nature. So, how does that happen? All right, first of all, the Buddha teaches us that we should think about the flaws of samsara, the reasons why samsara is faulted. In other words, we should learn to recognize the lack of value, lack of stability, lack of awareness, and the fundamental delusion that is samsara. That we should have the intention of thinking about this and actually spend time thinking about this. Now, this is something we avoid as Westerners because we don't like it. We don't want to hear that it's useless to go to the movies. I mean, because we want to go to the movies. I go to the movies sometimes. But we don't want to think, well, that's like 2 hours. It's not going to help you. But go ahead if you want to, you know. We don't want to think like that. We want to have immediate comfort and a good time, not to mention popcorn. So we don't want to think like that. We want to think those gratifying thoughts that will make us feel good, stable, content, alive, safe right now. However, in allowing our minds to think those thoughts or to be connected with and involved in those thoughts that only produce some sort of temporary result, that only produce the delusion of stability, that only produce some sort of short-term gratification, that will have no good effect on our practice, and we will be again like that rudderless boat that can't negotiate. If you're making no choices about the content of the mind, then you are making no choices about what karma is ripening and coming forward. You have no power. Zero power. But the key to right thought, and the reason why the Buddha has given us this method, is that training our minds in right thought can not only bring about the ripening of virtuous and happier and more fortunate karma, because like draws like, but it will also hold at bay in a very powerful way this non-virtuous karma until we can create in our practice the opportunity to do enough purification to where those old negative karmic causes are simply outweighed. They're simply outweighed. I mean, there's a real mechanical aspect to this. You know, it's like this. There's not a big abstract secret here. You're trying to outweigh the non-virtue. You want the virtue pile to be bigger. Much bigger. And since we've had a lot of time to work on this, we're supposed to get busy now. So this right thought, then, is an extremely beneficial companion and method on the path. The Buddha has actually taught us a completely different way to think. The Buddha has taught us that instead of this temporary gratification, instead of this need to make what is actually a very transitional, very impermanent, very diluted kind of perceptual experience more stable, which is not possible actually, and more comfortable, which is just a game you're playing, in a temporary way has no good effect for oneself and one's practice. Instead, we should understand that we have all this mixed karma. Really, literally, we have, since time out of mind, accumulated enough karma to go right now to the God realms, and we have enough karma to go right now to the hell realms. Right now, without even accumulating one drop more. So the Buddha teaches us we should be mindful of that. We should understand the faults of cyclic existence and have the attention to not fall prey to the game of temporary gratification and letting the mind have its candy, rather than habituating oneself towards accomplishing right thought, virtuous thought, thoughts with good intentions, that sort of thing, which will actually change the course of one's reality right now. Let's say if you were to go on a spiritual diet, and this is an example of what I mean, starting right now at 12 o'clock on Saturday. Let's say we're going to go on a 24-hour fast. Let's say we're going to fast away from those temporary gratifying thoughts. We're going to just not do those for 24 hours. It won't kill you, it's just 24 hours. And let's say instead we're going to meditate on the Buddhist teachings and look and contemplate on all those teachings that really turn the mind away from samsaric impermanence and stabilize the mind more on being aware or awakened to our own primordial true nature and acting accordingly. Let's say in this next 24 hours we think a lot about the flaws of cyclic existence. How easy it is to be going along just skippity-doo-dah, we're doing great, we're doing happy, and all of a sudden samsaric existence will just blow your behind off. And it could happen right now. It could happen right now. You could stop breathing. Right now something could happen in your life that changes everything. I mean, you know that things like that have happened to you already. So let's say that we start thinking like that. And what we're doing here is we're weaning ourselves slowly through abstinence, actually. Weaning ourselves away from that kind of samsaric, deluded, temporary thinking. And gearing ourselves and stabilizing our minds in a more clear awareness of our nature and how to act in accordance with our nature. If you could possibly do that for 24 hours, you will change your life. In Tibetan Buddhism, we have many such practices. We have like Nyungne, which is a fasting and contemplative kind of practice that one does periodically. And you can even wear the robes while you're doing it so that you completely take yourself away from the ordinary world for say 24 hours and put yourself in this other environment. If done well and with good depth, this 24-hour kind of practice can change your life forever. Well, forever. We don't like that word in Buddhism, do we? It'll change our life Now, so how does that happen? See, again, we never do an activity like that. We would never contribute 24 hours like that to our unfolding because we really don't see how that can help. I mean, just mentally, we don't get it. How can that help? I mean, we'll just go back to our old habits after that. How are you going to create a new habit in 24 hours? Well, from what I've just told you, again, here you are with your mind stream containing the currently ripening karma that it does. And you've got all this negative and positive karma since time out of mind floating around out there, just itching to come forward, give me a chance, make my day. And so you spend this 24 hours in right thought, right intention. What can happen, and the way that this can change your mind, the way that it probably will change your mind and your world and your reality, is that it will ripen, it will vibrationally connect to and ripen virtuous karma that you have accomplished in the past and create for you kind of like a clear space. The mind that the way you think your mind is, the way you recognize yourself to be, is really only the condition of your mind stream with its floating bubbles of karma. That's all it is. It's the content of your own karmic and habitual tendency. Just sort of coming to the surface of the mind stream. So that's what you call you, and you think it's very solid and permanent, but it's changing moment by moment. Constantly changing. You're not the same person one day that you are another. 10 minutes ago, you might have been a very different person. Because what's ripening is coming to the surface, and that expresses as the content of the mind stream. Yet to us in our delusion, it seems perfectly solid, perfectly secure. This is who I am, and I've always been this person since 1949, and I'm going to be this way until I die. When all you have to do is look in the mirror and see you don't look the same as you looked 20 years ago. How can you possibly be the same person? 20 years from now, you're not going to look. How can you possibly be the same person? Yet, in our delusion, that's what we do. We just sort of take care of business right here. So, in order to engage in this right thought in such a way as to benefit the practice, we would try to ripen these more fortunate, more virtuous bubbles or seeds of karma. We hope to magnetize them and magnify them and bring them forward. And then now these are the seeds that have ripened in our mind stream. Now these are the seeds that are the bubbles that are on the surface of our mind stream. Now we're different. To engage in right thought for 24 hours would create that difference. And so the Buddha teaches us not only to engage in right thought on a temporary basis, but to do so constantly. Constantly. And really, right thought and right intention, these are so close and very difficult to separate. Literally, if one were to have right thought, that is, accepting the notion of samsara and understanding its nature as well as the nature of enlightenment according to what the Buddha has taught, and contemplating on that, to engage in that kind of right thought, right even contemplation, then what will happen is In doing that, we will avoid having the karmic seeds of self-absorption and ego-cherishing continually ripen and come to the surface of the mind. And instead, we will have this more fortunate, more beneficial, more virtuous karma ripen and come to the surface of the mind. Soon we begin to experience a sense of calmness. For one thing, we are not wrapped up in the dance of temporary gratification, which produces the most irate mind. I mean, you know, the mind that is involved in temporary gratification is going, I want something sweet. Oh, now I've had something sweet, I want something salty. Now I had something salty, I need to drink. Now I've had something to drink, I better have some protein. Now I've had all this, I better sit down for a while because I'm full. Oh, now I better watch some TV. You know, and the mind is, it's like a squabble. You know, it's like, and all the time we're going, oh, this feels good, let's try this. Oh, this tastes good, we'll try this, let's feel good. And we're thinking, this is what we should do. In the meantime, the mind is like eating itself. It's going, I want. So instead, we would be engaging in a different kind of thought, which is not so much concerned with this immediate gratification, this temporary gratification, not so much involved with self-cherishing, but it's thinking about that we have been involved in the idea of self-nature being inherently real since time out of mind. It's thinking about the causes that has created, thinking about the results it might bring about. We are thinking about our intention to awaken to the primordial wisdom state, to awaken to the Buddha nature. We are thinking about the suffering of others and about how we can benefit them. These thoughts are not the short-term thoughts. These are more, they're calmer. Obviously they're more productive, but they produce a kind of vibrational quality in the mind stream that is less excitable, less inflamed. You know, and instead the mind is more spacious, it's more calm, it's more concerned with these things that are not so temporary, more concerned with these things that are not so all over the map, not so involved in this temporary gratification. And so from that, the quality of our attention begins to change. We begin to be attentive to different things. While the mind is inflamed with what you want next and how to follow sweet flavors with salty flavors and salty flavors with cool drinks and you know, all that stuff. While the mind is involved with that, the mind is choppy. It's choppy, it's inflamed. It is not at peace. It's like the waters of the mind, if you can imagine them, are choppy and stuff gets churned up from underneath and it's a mess, you know. But to think in terms of right thought, the mind stream is more calm. There isn't that compulsion to perceive what you're feeling right now so that you can fix it right now. Instead, you're more concerned with broader, less self-cherishing issues. These are the issues the Buddha has taught. These are thoughts that arise from the Buddha nature, as opposed to thoughts that arise from the samsaric desire nature. So they have a different quality, a different effect. Automatically, simply by thinking right thoughts, one becomes happier because the mind stream is more calm. You are more content, less inflamed. Whereas if we are involved in the idea of temporary gratification and all that samsaric stuff, the mind is so choppy, so irritated, so inflamed, that there's really barely a moment of happiness before you have to go on to the new search. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And you know that from your own experience. It's like, when does it end? I mean, so many of us, and really all of us, spend so much of our lives obsessed with how we feel. I'm feeling this, I'm feeling that. I have a pain over here. I have a pain over here. You know, I'm feeling this, I'm feeling that. This fits this way, this is this. And we're so upset. It's like we're constantly monitoring how we feel. And of course, constantly monitoring how we feel, this kind of temporary gratification of our thoughts to try to feel happy or try to feel good, to try to counteract the feeling that we're having, or to enforce the feeling that we're having. You know, this kind of thing is creating the mind even more inflamed, even more choppy, and happiness is not possible. The only thing that one feels is the constant search for that thing that's going to change the way you feel now, or some way to hold on to a temporary good feeling. And so that is the textbook method as to how to produce unhappiness. Because it's so desire-oriented. It's so biased on the idea that you've got to have something to keep yourself happy right now in a stable way, even though that's not possible. It's so based on delusion, it simply doesn't have the capacity to bring a good result. Again, if we're doing this, practicing this right thinking, we have created in our mind stream a kind of spaciousness with the potential to practice. Even in terms of increasing your capability as a practitioner, you know yourself, if you go in to do a prayer shift and you sit down in the prayer room and all you can think about is, I got a pain here, I got a pain here, you know, my boyfriend's not good to me, my wife left me, and I need this, and if I don't get my car fixed, I'm not going to be happy, and this job is really driving me crazy, and then, you know, and I got aches and the pains and the teeth and the hair and the, you know, just all this stuff going on. You can't practice. You can't practice. There is no practice. Because the mind's just sitting there going, just chewing you up. Whereas with the inclusion of right thought in your everyday activity and some concentration on the contemplations the Buddha has given us, the mind quality is entirely different. Now we sit down to practice and we get the meaning of practice. We see the reason for it. We see that there's a goal here. We're not sitting down to practice because she said so. We're not sitting down to practice because it's cool to be a Buddhist. Or we're not sitting down to practice because, well, just because, some mindless reason. We're sitting down to practice because we wish to change the quality of our mind stream in order to make progress, in order to become enlightened, in order to liberate sentient beings. Again, it's like getting the big picture as opposed to, you know, that analogy of looking at the elephant through a little hole. One sees the trunk and it seems like, you know, a snake, and one sees the foot and it seems like a, you know, a big object, and one sees the, you know, it's just that you can't recognize the elephant when the mind is that irritated and that self-involved with these small concerns. So this having right thought is and should be a part of one's practice. Unfortunately, and the reason why I'm making such a big deal about this is that we don't do it. And if we do it, we don't do enough of it. The only time we'd be really doing enough of it is if we could somehow manage to do it constantly, to where the mind was truly calm. So this right thought is something that we should adhere to and try to practice in the best way possible. Now, many of you are taking Ngundro practice. You have the perfect opportunity to do that because you have the contemplations that are associated with Ngundro. But please don't limit yourself to only that. The Buddha has given many teachings. There are many ways to understand the faults of samsara. Many other words to use and expressions that one can give rise to that make the understanding more deep. But to understand oneself as that which requires constant manipulation of the environment in order to attain some kind of self-gratification, in order to maintain some sort of temporary hit. This is something that produces literally no happiness, takes away the option of happiness, and produces a very tense and narrow focus and mind, and prohibits practice which can bring about the ultimate relief. So here we have a choice. As a practitioner, what's our choice going to be? Here's a guidepost that you might be able to use. If you're thinking like the Buddha thinks, then you're in a state of wisdom based on the awareness of ourselves as that which has maintained the idea of self-nature being inherently real since time out of mind. The Buddha sees what we are in a completely different way, recognizes the nature, but also understands the cause and effect scenarios that, because of our ignorance, we have engaged in and brought about these seeds of karma. We, on the other hand, only see what works right now, or what we think works right now. But we're usually wrong because we don't really understand the nature of time. To us, time is a very finite, linear thing, and it's from here to here. We don't understand any of this. So we really can't tell what's going to work. But that doesn't stop us from doing what we think is going to feel good right now. It's going to work right now. So a good guidepost or a good way to judge right thought is, if you are thinking to solve problems and are thinking in such a way that takes into account only that you were born and that you will die and that you have some things and that you don't have some things, and presupposes that you are a human and that this is your nature and that you know your nature and that your nature is fairly permanent, and that ordinary kind of point of view, then generally, if there is any kind of result, good or bad, we can see that that result will take place right now or in the immediate future. Now, if we are adapting the Buddha's view more closely, if we are adapting the Buddha's view and we are understanding ourselves to be the very nature that is the Buddha, but in a spin of delusion because of this idea that self-nature is inherently real, if we kind of understand that, kind of understand what we have at our command, both good and bad in terms of karmic seeds and potentials, And if we get the big picture and make choices and have our thoughts based on that, the result will not be immediate and probably will not occur in the immediate future. But in understanding our nature, we understand how temporary and impermanent this moment is. And we discover that it's a lot smarter, a lot wiser to not so much concentrate on the necessity of gratifying ourselves right now, but rather to think, what effect will this have when I enter the bardo? What effect will the activity I'm doing right now, what effect will it have in my next life? Or lives to come? Are these seeds I want to, because I'm going to be eating this fruit someday, do I want to plant this seed? Like that. I've actually had some people argue with me saying, well, Buddhism sounds like it's always in the future, it's always in the future. What about living in the present moment? There is nobody that lives in the present moment better than a Buddhist. Because a samsaric who is trying to practice, because a samsaric being is trying to escape to the next moment. They're not living in the present. They're trying to escape to that next moment of gratification. A Buddhist is full aware that the nature of human beings is much different than what we think. It's a much greater reality. That we are experiencing things that we planted the seeds for earlier, and we will experience the things that we're planting the seeds for now. Therefore, be in the moment now and create the seeds that you want to live with. Be in touch with what you're creating now. But the view should always be toward the relatively infinite future. Particularly because, as the Buddha teaches, we are in a position of great fortune where right now, because of the path, we are learned. We know how to create seeds that will bring benefit in the future. Ordinarily, we can't do that because we just don't know how. So yes, the Buddhist lives in the present moment. You betcha, because we have to live in the future moment pretty soon. And that's going to be present. And you're going to be eating it one way or the other. You might as well like the flavor. So, if therefore we ever come up to a kind of personal choice, and we're fooling ourselves if we think we don't come up to these personal choices every day, every hour, every minute. We think only when we come to crisis in our lives have we come to these personal choices. But we make personal choices constantly. All the time. And that's why right thought has to be practiced all the time. But let's say we make some sort of, and I'll use an outrageous example, let's say we make some sort of personal choice that, I don't know, let's say, well, it's an interesting thing about human beings. Let me add this real quick. Our determination of love, what love means to us is temporary gratification. Really, if we were to practice actual love, it would be more like faith and devotion. More like what you offer the three precious jewels. It wouldn't be, I'll do this so you'll do this to me, and we'll both feel good. That really isn't love. That's something else. I don't know what that is. Love does not rely on condition to change it. Love is more like Love in its truest sense is more like faith and devotion in that it assumes goodness. It assumes the nature. Like we assume the nature of the three precious jewels. We know that the Buddha arises from this primordial wisdom state. We assume that. And so we have a natural faith and devotion. Whereas with our love relationships, basically, I'm going to love you as long as you love me the way I want you to. But when you don't love me the way I want you to, I'm gone. So that's human love. Really, the kind of love that we should embrace should be a much deeper kind of thing. So let's say that based on that not understanding the difference between a truer and deeper, more profound kind of love and that ordinary human contract stuff. Let's say we get to an episode in our lives where we just don't like it anymore. We don't like our families, we don't like our spouses, we don't like what they're doing for us anymore. So if we don't like what they're doing for us anymore, we're leaving. So let's say we leave. And why are we leaving? We're not leaving because we're hateful, miserable creatures. We're leaving because we are ignorant and we don't know how else to get happy. We just don't know how else to get happy. We're trying to be happy, but we have no idea what makes happiness. So we think, you're not loving me enough. And you people are not loving me enough, and you're not supporting me enough, and you don't have dinner on the table by 6, and you're not, you don't wash my underwear very well, and so I'm going. So I'm just going because enough is enough. I want to be happy. So you make this ridiculous choice, and you go off and you try to be happy. How do you know that you made a bad choice? And I'm not talking about I don't know whether your marriage is valid or not. How do I know? But I know automatically you made a bad choice. How do I know that? Because you just did something that's looking for a temporary, immediate, gratifying result. I want to feel good now, and I want someone else to do it. Your job. The old people failed me, I'm going to pick a new one. And you're going to make me feel better. And if I can do it, I'm going to pick someone that's also going to make me feel right about my choices. Let's add that to the package too, so that I can feel really good. But how do I know that what you've chosen is wrong? I don't know anything about your spouse, I don't know anything about your job, don't know anything about your family, but here's what I know. You did not pick something, you did not pick an activity that's going to bring you an excellent result in the bardo, because you chose to make yourself happy right now, to make yourself feel good about you right now. You won't love me enough? Then I'm going to take my cards and play elsewhere. You don't love me the way I think you should? I'm going out. That choice can't possibly bring good results in the bardo. It's all self-cherishing. It's all about instant gratification. It's all about I want what I want. And I didn't get what I want, so I'm going. Whereas if you had right thought, using the Buddha's tools to make decisions like that, the whole format would be different. The basis on which you made those decisions would not be, do I like how you're treating me or don't I? Do I like how much you love me or don't I? The choices would be completely different because we would be recognizing that here we're making a choice that is of benefit, that is based on virtue, that is based on recognition of the big picture, that is based on intelligence, which is based on recognition of the big picture. And so the choice that I'm making now, I will gladly reap the benefit of it in the bardo, in my next life, and in other lives to come. because I'm free now to make this choice based on the awareness that I can either choose something samsaric in order to get some sort of feel-good hit, or I can choose something meaningful and profound. And perhaps that is to set the task before me of making it less important, the love that I get from you, than how important it is that I love you properly. That's a choice. Hey, that's a choice. And that one's going to bring benefit in the future. So instead, let's say you choose, it's not so much about the life situation you're in. Maybe that's not really what you're making the choice about, but maybe instead you make the choice of saying, wait a minute, I think what I'm going to do to solve this problem is to give more love. I'm going to be steadfast in my love. I am going to love so much that the circumstances turn around. And they will too. They will. Unbeatable force. I'm gonna be constant. I'm gonna love so hard. And I'm going to get the big picture. This is a family that I have karma with. There's reason here, there's something here, let me see what I can do. You know, let's see what we can fix up here. It's a different way of thinking. It's a different way of considering. Now, what you've also done at the same time is you have practiced. Maybe it wasn't formal practice. Maybe you didn't even realize that's what you were doing, but in engaging in right thought, right intention, using the Buddha's contemplations to turn the mind, and acting accordingly, that actually is a practice that will bring about calm in the mind stream, relaxation, because the nature of pure thought and pure intention and compassion and loving kindness is smooth and spacious. Whereas the nature of, I'm going to get mine now, damn you, that is choppy, inflamed, whacked out. You can't possibly become saner making choices on that basis. You just get crazy as a loon. Crazier and crazier and crazier. And pretty soon you get to the point where you have no idea how to make yourself happy. You're just grabbing. And then you start short-circuiting everything. Because you're out of control. You're whacked out of control. Because the mind quality is like zzz, choppy. So this is why the Buddha has carefully indicated to us that we must contemplate these thoughts always, 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 and always think the way using the ideas and images that the Buddha has given us. Right thought is about thinking of ourselves in the way the Buddha has indicated we should think of ourselves. Thinking of others in the way the Buddha has indicated we should think of others. Thinking of samsara in the way that the Buddha has indicated we should think of samsara. And having the pure intention to awaken in wisdom the way the Buddha has indicated we should. That's right thought, and that's a correct form of practice. Always I have said that you should constantly be thinking about the Buddha's teachings in a humble way, because really that's the pure way of practice. But do you understand? It's the only way to practice. I think I would like to start off this afternoon by reading a quote to you from Trinley Norbu's book, Trinley Norbu Rinpoche's book, called White Sail. So this is in defense of the many teachings we've had on bodhicitta ad nauseum. bodhicitta ad nauseum. That's a particular brand that I teach. Just goes on and on. So do you remember how, those of you that have been around for a while, how all the times I've said, Lord Buddha said that bodhicitta is the most important thing. I don't know where he said it, but I know he said it. So I found out where he said it. Well, I don't know exactly, but anyway, I have a direct quote here, and if Trinley Norber put it in his book, it's all right. So here it is, the quote from Lord Buddha that you should pay close attention to. For those of you who want to attain enlightenment, do not study many teachings. Only study one. What is it? It is the great compassion. Whoever has great compassion has all Buddha's qualities in his hand. So there. I think that just about sums it up, don't you? We can go home now. Actually, this is something that, along with considering how to contemplate the Buddha's teachings, considering as well how to practice good intention and good thought, right thought, and so forth, how to accumulate wisdom and knowledge, everything, all of the directions that one takes on the path of Dharma can be condensed into the bodhicitta. And everything, all the wisdom, all of the content, all of the value, all of the nectar of this path is expressed as the bodhicitta. Now, for so many of us, we make the mistake of thinking that if we can get the technique down, or if we can meditate a certain amount of time every day, and if we can maybe go and get a lot of teaching, and maybe take lots of empowerments and lots of teachings, and we keep thinking that to do these things will get us further on the path of Dharma. Well, that may be true, so long as one has given rise to the bodhicitta, so long as one practices and studies on the bodhicitta and makes the bodhicitta the main intention of one's practice. That's the part that we often forget. So our intention on this path is everything, absolutely everything. In order to practice more deeply, in order to get any result at all, the intention is everything. When we practice Dharma, or when, actually I should say, let me backtrack, when the lamas teach us Dharma, they, as you know, teach us bodhicitta again and again and again. And a lot of times you'll come in expecting to have a big, delicious, delectable, very high level tantric teaching, and it's going to be on nature of mind and all those really exciting things. So you come in and the Lama spends about this much time on bodhicitta and motivation, and about that much time on the nature of mind. And everybody thinks, oh, what a ripoff. All this compassion and no nature of mind. Let me explain to you why you're wrong. I love to do that, you know? So much fun to sit up here in my box and explain to you all why you are wrong. So let me do that one more time. Lest you get too confident on the path. When the Lama gives us teaching on the bodhicitta, when that display is first heard, it should never be considered a preliminary teaching or a beginning teaching. It should never be considered the baby stuff that you have to get through in order to get to the big stuff. In fact, bodhicitta is the first and the last teaching that we have to accomplish on the path. It pervades the path. Every step that we take along the path utterly depends on our accomplishing the bodhicitta, on our having right intention. So this being the case, what is it that we're actually learning when we learn the bodhicitta? What is it that's actually being given to us? Our understanding is that we learn bodhicitta first because it is the goody two-shoes stuff, you know, or maybe it's foundational. We simply have to go through that in order to be qualified, and words like that are thrown around in the Dharma scene. They are thrown around. Are you qualified for that teaching? So we think that bodhicitta is the stuff you have to pass through to be qualified for that teaching, as though this bodhicitta had no potency. And it's because our understanding of bodhicitta is fundamentally that we should be good boys and girls. But you see, that's another philosophy entirely. In fact, that's another religion. It's not to say that we shouldn't be good little boys and girls, but it is to say that our understanding has to go a great deal deeper than that. Because when we are given teachings on the bodhicitta, we are being given teachings on the nature of mind. They are different than the formal teachings on nature of mind that are set out in all that great highfalutin technical language. But in essence, they are the very same. And that's because, well, we should look at it two different ways. First of all, when we try to understand what the bodhicitta means, we can understand it in these ways. First of all, the bodhicitta should be understood as the awakening nature. It's awakening. It's moving towards awakening. And the bodhisattva is an awakening being. But awakening to what? Are we talking about smarter and smarter? Are we talking about better and better? No, those are samsaric ideas. Those are samsaric concepts. And those are the ones that we try to measure by, and those are the ones we've been taught to think by. But in fact, when we receive teachings on the bodhicitta, we are actually receiving teachers. You can tell, I'm at the end of the day. We are actually receiving teachings on the nature of mind, because the bodhicitta is more to be understood as the display of the primordial wisdom nature, in the sense that as the Buddha has come to the world, and as the Buddha has brought his teaching to the world, he has brought the path of Dharma. This very path of Dharma, this very gift that he brought to the world, is enlightened intention. It's the Buddha's wisdom. It arises not from samsara, not from worldly measurements and worldly issues, but rather from the Buddha's innate wisdom. And so, all that we see on the Dharma path is actually a display of the Buddha's nature. Again, a display of the Buddha's intention, display of the Buddha's compassion, display of the Buddha's wisdom, display of the Buddha's knowledge. All of the teachings, if we look at them, are kind of like an emanation display of what is intrinsically the Buddha nature. It's as though if you could imagine the purest primordial state moving into display or emanation, that is the bodhicitta. So therefore, the appearance of our teachers in the world, who can bring to us the Dharma path, who can provide for us this method that Lord Buddha taught so long ago, who can propagate and perpetuate the teachings throughout time, this is the bodhicitta. This is the very display of the bodhicitta. So the bodhicitta is not just like the Ten Commandments. I know for those of us that have crossed religious thresholds, we have a little trouble with some of that old stuff, but it's not like the Ten Commandments. Do this, and don't do this, don't do that, don't do that. It's not like that. It should be understood much more deeply as the very essence, the very display, the very emanation of the Buddha's primordial wisdom, of our fundamental nature as well. So to give rise to the bodhicitta is to give rise to the awakening mind. It's not just being kind. Being kind may be considered some kind of outward expression. Being concerned with what the Buddha is concerned with, which is the liberation and salvation of all sentient beings. Being concerned with the condition of beings and how difficult it is for them to make progress, to understand how to bring about happiness rather than a bad result. This is something that we remain concerned with, but in effect, it is a display of the bodhicitta. But to think that it is all that the bodhicitta is, that simply to just let yourself hang out in those surface level thoughts, thinking that kindness is bodhicitta, period. That would be like saying, this note is that symphony. You'll find it in that symphony. It's in there many times, but it is not that symphony. So the bodhicitta is the awakening state. Most of us make the mistake, and again, here is where we have to go over and over and over what the Buddha has taught and contemplate the true and deeper meaning of the Buddhist teachings. Most of us think that to progress on the path is to appear more and more like a Buddhist. Or to progress on the path is to learn more and more technology. Or to progress on the path is simply to get older on the path. Or to progress on the path would be to become maybe more and more expert on Dharma customs and Dharma ideas and Dharma traditions. And you know, all of these have a place in our progress. But to think that that measures the growth of a practitioner is probably erroneous. If we think deeply about this quote from the Buddha is saying outright, if you really want to reach enlightenment, that's what he said, if you want to reach enlightenment, practice the bodhicitta. He said, if you want to reach enlightenment, don't learn all the different, don't study many things in Dharma. Accomplish the bodhicitta. So what's being said there, if you think about that, if you play with that in your mind a little bit, it's kind of like he's saying, if you don't want to practice enlightenment, but would prefer to be a very good practitioner, then practice all the different practices and forget the bodhicitta. Now we have to make a decision. And here again we have to go back to right thought, right contemplation. We have to decide whose rules we're playing by. Are we playing by the rules that give us that gratification, that instant gratification, that solve our endless cravings and needs, and the need to be able to establish ourselves as stable, solid selves? Are we going to go by that because, 30, 35, 40, 50, 60 years of experience have told us that's what we're supposed to do here? Or are we going to look at the Buddha's point of view? And remember, the Buddha sees us and all the causes and all the seeds, all the karmic seeds since time out of mind, sees that we are experiencing this mind stream filled with all these habitual tendencies and karmic ripenings, and we think that's us. And it is no more stable than sand falling through my fingers. It is no more permanent than that. And yet we think this stuff floating on the top, well, that's us. And we're going to make it stay that way. We're just going to keep those thoughts. So what if we went ahead and really kind of tried to guide ourselves according to what the Buddha has taught? Now, the Buddha has taught that, remember, all of samsara is pervaded with suffering, and all sentient beings are suffering, that they suffer and revolve mindlessly in samsara because they do not know how to create the causes to make happiness. So let's say we really start thinking about that, and we start integrating into our practice right thought, right contemplation. Yay! Very good. So now we're thinking about all this stuff. So now we realize that the need of sentient beings would have to be achieving enlightenment in order to be free from the wheel of birth and death, to be free of the wheel of samsara, to be able to minister to others to alleviate their suffering. That this would be the thing. Because if we look at the fact that we've been here since time out of mind, and we're going to be working this out until more time out of mind, going in that direction, it kind of makes you think, wait a minute. Wait just a minute here. How long do we want to do this? Is it going anywhere? Are we getting anywhere with this? Of course, if we're trying to gratify ourselves quickly, or at least in the very near future, if we're trying to manipulate our environment so that it satisfies us, then we're going by our samsaric instincts. We're going by what we have learned as human beings. And it's no solution at all. Instead, though, now we're going to be thinking in the same way, hopefully, that the Buddha thinks, to see the greater picture or the longer view. Having seen the longer view, we understand that cyclic existence is flawed. We understand that all sentient beings are just like bumping into each other, like bees in a jar. Just zoom, 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 busy, busy, trying to solve our problems, trying to figure out what I want, and how I feel, and how to feel better. But these are the temporary, short, ordinary kinds of considerations. And what is the result they bring? As we learned earlier, they bring an inflamed mind. A mind that is just jerked around all the time. Deeper neuroses, and then eventually you just get crazier than a loon. So, if instead we look at it from the Buddhist point of view, we can see very clearly there's no choice. The point of practicing the Buddhist path, the point of listening to all these teachings, the point of practicing right view, right thinking, right contemplation, right meditation, all of that has to be so that we are no longer biased towards this temporary self-cherishing gratification dance. And instead, we're going for really solving some of the problems that are hitting us right now. And we understand that what's hitting us right now is result. There is nothing you're experiencing right now, or any time in your life, that is not result of previous causes, whatever they were, and you may never know. So, what we have to do now is to think of a way to really hold to what the Buddha has taught. Not invent our own religion, not think we got all the answers through our ordinary means, but rather really rely with devotion and faith on the Buddha's teachings.
Nanda.